Greetings, bones and ghouls. It's time for Halloween in July. I was not expecting to start this off with System Shock 2, but hey, the many are considered an alien life form by everyone on the Von Braun, so it fits this year's theme. We're taking the whole month and then some to do a bunch of spooky games and have a spooky good time. This year the theme is Alien Encounters, which System Shock 2 totally fits. So you know what, we're gonna do it. It's like, I'm not gonna not do this. What's really special about Halloween in July is that's when I slash my yearly rate on the Patreon as low as it'll go, and to sweeten the deal, anyone who pledges at that yearly rate gets their own patron patch as a free thank you gift, and anyone who pledges at the $5 recipe tier or higher to follow along with all the cooking segments gets their own patron apron to do all the cooking segments in, and as an even bigger thank you gift, because I am so DIY, I have finally gotten all the stuff I need to make the aprons at my home. So, with the savings that I make from just not needing anyone else to do these for me, I am throwing in a special secret surprise gift on top of all the aprons for this year at the $5 tier or higher. I love these things. They're so dorky. You need one of these in your life. Trust me, it is the best free gift you will ever receive. So, I know why we're all here. The System Shock 2 Remaster is finally out. On PC. Behold! System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster. That's a mouthful, so from here on out, we're just gonna try to call it the Remaster most of the time. This has been a long while in the works, and if I remember right, was a Kickstarter reward or bonus thing for the original System Shock remake way back in the day. Well, it's finally here. I did a video on System Shock 2 way back in the day before I was really aware that the remaster was going to be a thing, and I'm more than happy to get into this because the best thing about a good remaster is that now this game that was meant to run initially on late 90s Windows operating systems can now run on modern OSs just fine in just about any modern resolution and frame rate. For this video, I had the remaster running at 1440p at 120 frames per second in borderless mode, and it ran amazingly well, even with OBS and all the other bits and bobs running alongside it. If that's not enough to sell you on this remaster of a classic game, let's talk about the everything else. But first, let's do a shout out to a cool demo from a promising indie. This is gonna be the last demo shout out for a bit because in case you didn't know, I make all the Halloween in July videos in advance or else this just wouldn't work, and I only got the idea to start doing the demo shout outs a couple months ago. For now though, let's talk about PIGFACE. PIGFACE is a game where you play as Exit, someone who is very good at violence and is currently being extorted into doing that violence for an unknown malefactor. The demo plays like a first-person Hotline Miami, and I had a blast playing around with all the guns. You can sneak, you can rampage, you can use the shotgun as a bad dude launching device. There's also lots of fun physics to exploit, like enemies tripping over bodies of their fallen comrades around blind corners, and all the fun that comes with throwable melee weapons. As always, this is a demo, so it's totally free to try out, and if you like it, be sure to wishlist PIGFACE on Steam so that you can get notified when the full game comes out. System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster is, well, a remaster, so let's talk about those remastered visuals. They're great. Lucky for me, I've got my old System Shock 2 playthrough on file, so I can show you some clips from the original version of System Shock 2 to compare and contrast. For reference, what you're seeing here for comparison to the remaster is the GOG version of System Shock 2 as played circa 2018. I don't know what mods or tweaks were added to the GOG version back then, but it ran fine at 1080p and I was able to record it with Shadowplay, which was all you could ask for in those days. I don't think I need to point out the minutia of what's being updated here. So in broad strokes, all the models and textures look great. Hell, on stream we took a solid moment to marvel at how nice a literal friggin' garbage texture looked. The animations are also massively overhauled. Here's a good example that just encompasses everything with the pistol, which is likely the first gun you're gonna get in either version of the game. In the original, the pistol's fire animation is less of an animation and essentially just the model being rotated backwards a little while a low-res muzzle flash appeared on the screen. There wasn't even a reload animation, the pistol just moved off screen and then when it comes back up, the gun has bullets in it. In the remaster, while it's a very short animation, the pistol physically jerks back in the player's hand while the slide is sent backward to chamber a new round just like in a normal semi-automatic pistol, and a round casing flies out of the slide as the slide exposes the chamber. Yeah, there's still an explosion sprite being used for a muzzle flash, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's also a much nicer sprite. Then, you get a full reload animation where an empty magazine comes out and a full one goes in. There's even a draw animation now when you equip the pistol. This is the case for basically every weapon. I'm particularly fond of the assault rifle's reload, where at the end of inserting the new magazine, Goggles will also turn the rifle over to check the chamber. Some are more elaborate than others, and I think the animations for the wrench were intentionally kept the same for the homage to how it's also the animation for some of the stuff in the Thief games. I'm not sure about that one though. The best way to put it is that a lot of detail and care has been put into updating every last little thing, be it the enemies or the weapons and the gear, everything in the game. However, at the same time, nothing is overdone or overbuilt. It is still undeniably, aesthetically, System Shock 2. The best way to put it is that Night Dive hit that sweet spot where System Shock 2 looks just like how you remembered it. To be fair, in my case, I played it nearly 20 years after the initial release, but that's still enough time to where your brain starts to fill in the blanks a little better than it should have. Nothing is super high res or looks like it belongs more in a mod pack where there are assets larger than the original game. On that note, if you're curious, the remaster is less than 3 gigs in download size and less than 4 unpacked and installed. That's always nice in the age of 100-something gigabyte games. The remaster does an excellent job in not only updating the graphics, but also making sure the game is still System Shock 2, rather than making it the prettiest game that happens to be System Shock. Night Dive made it the best version of System Shock 2 that it could be. I gotta be honest, I'm not really surprised by this when I think of the video I did last year when I was able to literally compare the original System Shock to the remake fairly easily, because this is just what Night Dive does. So how about that gameplay? Well, for starters, it's smooth. The game boots fast, loads fast, and certain exceptions notwithstanding is bug-free. The remaster runs like it was made for modern systems, which on one hand, yeah, it's a fairly small game that shouldn't have too many issues doing that, but on the other is also a 25-year-old game made for contemporary firmware and hardware of the time, which is one of the biggest barriers to entry when playing it, was that you had to figure out what mods or what version you need to download to get the thing to work on modern screens, and all the stuff that comes with that. The remaster runs out of the proverbial box. I don't think there's gonna be an actual box version, but you know, that would be pretty cool. Now, as for a point of reference, I'm running this on a relatively new brand name SSD, and this game has a minimum RAM requirement of 2 gigabytes and a recommended of 4. The GPU requirement is basically just, can it run DX11? Vulkan? Which, if you got a GPU from the last, I don't know, 10 years, maybe even as far as 15, you should be good. Like, if it wasn't for needing to be specific about this stuff, like in the Steam page, I'm pretty sure the graphics requirements would probably just be yes. The remaster never took more than 2 seconds to load any given level for me, and that's with VSync and all the other extra options on. I never experienced a single dip in frames, no matter how many dudes were on my screen, which can sometimes be a whole lot of dudes. If you're running a low-spec machine because times are as they are, and even then if you do have extra cash, high-end PCs have gotten absurdly pricey in the last few generations of GPUs, this is a good game to pick up because it runs well. But what about the game itself? Well, it's a near-perfect recreation of the original. Everything works just as it did 25 years ago, but now with the benefit of better frame rates and easier to look at graphics. You create your character, get plopped into a rapidly deteriorating situation on the Von Braun, and away you go. System Shock 2 is very much a continuation of the first game, except now you have a grid inventory like in the System Shock remake, and you have full first-person controls when you're not in the menu. Just about everything has a skill threshold to use, from researching weird bits of flesh you find on enemies to the assault rifle. Be careful about that assault rifle too. It is a delightful trap that it's a really good weapon that works off the single most abundant ammunition in the game. You can get it pretty early, and it's so utilitarian that you might end up accidentally neglecting to try out all the other cool weapons and abilities System Shock 2 has to offer, because this thing just ends up being the solution to all of your problems. But what else am I supposed to say here? It's System Shock 2. It's got gunplay like a first-person shooter, skill points in labyrinthine maps like a dungeon crawler, scarce resources and freaky enemies like a survival horror, and a story which in our current times might be fairly simple and straightforward, but was revolutionary at the time for how it seamlessly integrated all the lore snippets into gameplay and still holds up from a plot perspective today. This is a game that lets you have a whole bunch of unique builds that you will find to play entirely different from one another, and each of those builds will be an experience in and of itself. I'll admit that for this run I did on the single player side of my time with the remaster, I stuck to my old build as a Marine with an assault rifle and a laser pistol sidearm for the robots, which eventually graduated into the EMP rifle, despite what I just got done talking about in the last video. But I excuse this under the guise that I wanted to make sure I had a lot of direct comparisons to make between the original and the remaster. One day I'll try doing an OSA Psi heavy build, or maybe even exotic weaponry. The last thing to really talk about for the gameplay here is that the remaster is loyal to a fault in its recreation, and that includes all the old bugs that were in the original game. Yeah, between this and the Oblivion remaster, it's been a good year for Jak. I'll go more into depth about specific things to avoid or be wary of in a segment later in this video, but all the stuff we associate with System Shock 2 is still there. Upgrading your agility not only increases your speed, but also lowers player friction, which will eventually make every level the ice level. The remaster is also built on a later version of the Dark Engine, which the first two Thief games were made on, which means it has Thief mantling, and the reason why Arcane probably hated ladders so much. And Engineering Deck is just going to eat a weapon or two as you're going through it because of something to do with the map. I don't know, just expect to sacrifice a weapon to Shodan's lunch and save any free upgrades you find until after you're done with Deck 1. It is time for the cooking segment. It's summer, and summer means fairs, and fairs mean funnel cake. If you're from some strange place where they don't have funnel cake, it is a deep fried batter which is poured into frying oil via a funnel to create a lattice network of crispy strings, which is then topped with powdered sugar, fruit, or sometimes whole slices of cheesecake and scoops of ice cream. The tensile strength of your paper plate it is served on is the limit. However, I don't want to pay a guy $15 for a single funnel cake, which I then have to eat in the hellscape that is a sports arena parking lot converted into a fairgrounds. I want like 4 funnel cakes that I can eat in the comfort of my air-conditioned house. So funnel cake batter is the easiest thing to make because it's literally just pancake batter with a couple of optional additives. Just go buy a box of pancake batter from the store, make it mostly according to the instructions. I add a couple extra eggs to help with the structure of the final product, and then add in a teaspoon of vanilla extract and a teaspoon of cinnamon. If you don't live in a place where they have pancake mix because they just don't really do American style pancakes out there, I've linked several recipes on how to make it in the description. It's basically flour, eggs, oil, sugar, and baking powder. Mix up your batter well with a large whisk and then let it rest for at least 10 minutes to allow it to settle and be a little thicker when it comes time to pour it. Once the batter has had time to rest, pour it from the mixing bowl into a tall pitcher that will make it easier to pour into the oil later on. Now it's time to fry. What we're gonna do here is get a large pot like the one you'd make soup in because we need enough oil in order to fully deep fry all the batter, but we also need a whole lot of space to account for the displacement and the expansion of the batter. We're also gonna be using corn oil here because there is nothing more American than oil made out of corn. Get that thermometer in there, set the oil to a smidge over medium heat on the burner, and watch it like a hawk as it gets up to 350 degrees of freedom heat units or 175 funny baguette units depending on your region. Now comes the tricky part. What we're gonna do here is carefully take a funnel, preferably one with a longer handle, don't be like me, and start slowly pouring your batter from the pitcher into the funnel so that it starts slowly draining into the oil. Getting your funnel about halfway to 2/3 full will be more than enough batter to make an entire cake, and it's best to fill it up as much as that is, and then put the pitcher down so you can focus on moving the funnel around the pot so that you get a good network of batter strings. Be careful. While it's going to be not so bad at first, as you get towards the end of pouring the batter, the additional heat from the batter cooking might get a little intense on your hands. If you've got an oven mitt that allows you to have enough dexterity to hold the funnel while you're pouring, it'd be a very good idea to wear it. Once you're done pouring the batter in, the first side of your funnel cake is basically done cooking. What you're going to do now is use a combination of heat-safe tongs and a kitchen spider to first make sure that no edges of the cake are still sticking to the walls of the pot, and then slowly, carefully, turning the funnel cake over in the direction away from where you are facing to get the stuff on the top of the cake fully cooked for another 30 seconds or so. You can actually skip this if you're not feeling super confident in your flipping abilities. Instead, just use your kitchen spider to gently push the cake down under the oil for about 10 to 20 seconds so that the batter on the top isn't raw. Remember that we have eggs mixed inside of this batter, so we need to get it cooked. Once it's done, use the kitchen spider to gently lift the cake out of the pan and onto a plate that has plenty of paper towels on it, and then immediately dust it with powdered sugar. Now comes the most important part of the funnel cake: the toppings. I asked Night Dive CEO Stephen Kick what his go-to funnel cake topping was, and he told me fresh fruit and powdered sugar, which is not only reasonable, but generally a good choice. The natural acidity of sweet, tart fruits like strawberries and blackberries is great for cutting the richness of the funnel cake, and short of just blasting this thing with whipped cream is the easiest thing to top a funnel cake with. Just go ahead and wash the fruits of your choice. I'm doing strawberries, blueberries, and blackberries here because there was literally a display right at the front of the supermarket as I walked in. And then if you've got larger fruits like strawberries, cut them into chunks that'll share plenty of space on the fork with chunks of funnel cake and everything else. And that's it. You are good to go. Maybe add some whipped cream, but the fruit and powdered sugar on its own is more than enough here. But what if you don't want to make good choices today? Well, that's what macerating fruit is for. We're going to do everything the same with the fruit, but now, a day out, we're going to leave them in a large bowl and liberally cover them with sugar before giving them a little stir to make sure everything's got sugar on it. Now we pop that in the fridge overnight, maybe giving it another stir 6 to 8 hours at a time to check on it, and then when it's done, we'll have a lovely fruit syrup mix to pour over our funnel cake. It's kind of like letting the salt do the salt things, but now we're letting the sugar do the sugar things. Out of all the cakes I did today, my wife immediately picked this one for her dessert, and Dr. Charlatan proceeded to inhale like 2/3 of this before I was even done putting all my camera stuff away. Like really, the macerated fruit came out really good, and also it's like, funnel cake is like my wife's favorite fair thing. I've been meaning to do this recipe for so long. I think I mentioned cheesecake earlier, so let's do one of those next. Once your funnel cake is done, just plop a slice of plain New York cheesecake onto it and maybe some macerated fruit too if you ended up doing that before powdering the whole thing. You know, this is missing something, and this cheesecake came in a 2-pack. I know. Since we still have plenty of batter left over, we're gonna skewer the other slice of cheesecake with a barbecue stick, dunk it into the batter until it's well coated, and then we're gonna deep fry this sucker for a garnish. Now we're starting to look like county fair food, but it can get worse. It's time to act on all of our intrusive thoughts. It's time for the ultimate Oreo funnel cake. The first thing we're gonna do for this variation is get ourselves a sleeve of Oreos and freeze them overnight. I used double stuff here since I was going to do more stuff with Oreos later, but ideally you want thin Oreos for the freezing part. Once they're frozen and become brittle, we're gonna put them into a bowl and use a cocktail muddler or a mortar and pestle to grind up them into Oreo bits, full chunks. You can't do this if they're at room temperature because the filling will just turn everything into paste. Also, try and go slow and use like steady pressure because if you just try to hammer on these guys, you're gonna lose more cookie than you crush. Now, once the cake is out, we're gonna take a big ol' scoop of cookies and cream ice cream and plop that right in the middle, cover the rest of the cake with our crumbled Oreos, and then drizzle the whole thing with chocolate sauce and whipped cream. But we're not done yet. I bought the whole package of Oreos and we are going to use them. Use a pair of tongs to dunk some Oreos into what's left of the batter and put them in the oil. About 30 seconds on each side should do. Remove them to a paper towel lined plate to drain them, and when they've had a minute to cool down, we're going to dust them with powdered sugar and then take them by the sides and skewer them on a stick to garnish our funnel cake. And now we have a funnel cake for everyone. As always, if you want the full recipe with a standalone video, that's available over on patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where in order to celebrate Halloween in July, I've slashed the yearly rate as low as it'll go, and anyone who pledges yearly gets the new patron patch as a free thank you gift. And if you pledge yearly at the $5 recipe tier or higher, you get the new patron apron and a special surprise gift. This is gonna go on for all of Halloween in July, so get them while you can. I think it'd be good to go over a few pointers for people who are new to System Shock 2 and eager to try it out, and also for the old timers who played it ages ago and might need some reminders about how it was done back in the day, because it's been a while since we've had something really like System Shock 2. The first and most important thing to consider is that System Shock 2 uses an experience point system, which can be really confusing if you aren't reading it closely. System Shock 2 is a game that is heavily tied to its skill system, and you're going to have to accept that you cannot spec into everything, and that the things you don't spec into are things you are locked out of. Also, you don't just need the skill stats to effectively use something, you also need to actively level up your base stats associated with those skills if you want them to really work. I had a rather embarrassing moment during my playthrough thanks to a bad case of assault rifle brain because, come on man, when you modify this thing a couple times, it holds 72 rounds, and if you take the sharpshooter perk, it'll take down a rumbler in 5 of those rounds. I forgot about leveling skills and base stats and was really struggling to hack into things and repair stuff despite heavily investing in those skills. Oh, by the way, another thing to note, repair and maintenance are 2 totally different skills. The former is for fixing stuff that is outright broken and inoperable, and the latter is for keeping stuff from getting broken and inoperable. Welcome to late 90s gaming. I finally realized very late in the game that I had forgotten to put any points into Cyber Affinity, the base stat governing all cybernetic skills, and I dumped a large amount of cyber modules I've been picking up into that stat, and it went from the base level to level 4. My hacking minigames went from being nearly impossible to becoming a cakewalk, and my security shutdown time went from 45 seconds tops to a whole 10 minutes. Also, if you want to hack a turret, you don't just hack the turret. You have to hack the security system first to shut them down, and then you hack into the turret. Work fast. This is the case for all skills. Leveling into the infamously broken Crystal Blade won't do much if you haven't put any points into strength. You can have all the psionic abilities in the game, but they'll only tickle the bad guys at most if you don't have the points into psionic aptitude, and so on. There's no leveling up and getting free points into your base stats. You need to actively invest your cyber modules into every aspect of your character. If you don't want a lopsided build that has access to a bunch of things, but can't really do anything with the high tier weapons you dump so many cyber modules into unlocking. Now, about those bugs I mentioned earlier, the big one is that engineering eats your guns, and you're just gonna have to accept that. There's also a melee is pretty much carried over from the last Thief game, which can be good if you know how to exploit it, but also very bad for you at times. Also, while the speed booster is handy for backtracking, which you are going to do a lot of, especially if you want to do research, you can and will take enough impact damage to die when bumping into walls if your agility is too high. However, I think that's more of a working as intended thing, as I believe fall damage is determined by impact speed in this game. Just be careful with how many points you put into agility, especially when things start getting slippery. Back to engineering though, because it isn't just your guns. It will eat anything that gets kicked out of your inventory. I made the mistake of attempting to pick up a chemical I needed for research on my co-op run while my inventory was full, and locked us all out of using the annelid healing organs until we could get to the next area that has osmium in it. Another thing that's less of a bug and more of a design choice is that certain builds are going to have a hard time in certain areas. I did not get much mileage out of my maxed out energy weapons when I entered the body of the many, where most annelid entities are highly resistant to energy weapons. The game tries to help you a little though with the world's most convenient vending machine. The game also has a hard time with ladders, and you'll find yourself struggling to get off them or onto a ledge or near them all the time. The less time you spend near ladders in this game, the better you are off. And lastly, while this isn't necessarily a bug, another thing carried over from Thief and other Dark Engine games is the mantling system, which unless you're already into those games, can take a bit of getting used to. You need to be up against the thing you want to mantle, not about to jump onto it like from another ledge, and then when you're up against it, you hold down space until the whole animation is done. And it's not like an animation with like physical movement, it's an animation where it looks like the camera is just being like physically moved. If you let go too early, you'll just plop back down. I only bring this up because it's generally something that a lot of people get tripped up on if they aren't familiar with how the Dark Engine works with mantling. Finally, for pointers and refreshers, it's good to remember that System Shock 2 is a game that will give you all the information you need to complete it, but at times that information is hard to find. you will need to re-listen to audio logs to parse clues left in them to figure out what you need to do next. And reading the map is not a suggestion. Most of the Von Braun's decks are labyrinthine messes that make zero sense from a foot traffic perspective, and the only map markers you get are the ones that you make yourself, which you cannot see through walls or on a compass. I don't even think there is a compass in this game. The closest thing you get to a quest log is your notes tab of your PDA interface that will tell you things in a vague sense, such as, I need to flush the radiation from the engine access tunnels, or there's a broadcasting antenna in the athletics deck that I need to shut down, and it will tell you nothing of the elaborate series of steps you need to get through the entire floor to access the athletic deck, or how to find the code that is hidden on monitors scattered across one of the largest levels in the game. But hey, at least the monitors aren't randomized. This is a game that can take sometimes half an hour to parse out what later games would give you in seconds, and as icing on the cake will give you a literal GPS arrow to your objective. This is a game where, actually yes, you do need to search every body, every desk, and every trash can because important quest items are hidden in them. This is a game that cares not that you're out of health hypos. Have a dozen more spiders. This is a game where you can get stuck, and there is no shame in referencing a walkthrough if you hit a point where like an hour has gone by and you still haven't figured out what to do. I know I had my moments like that my first time around back in the day. Lucky for us though, System Shock 2 is a very old and prolific game, and there's no shortage of guides that are well written for it. I suggest Port Forward's guide if you get stuck, as the images are great and the text does a good job of spelling things out for you. You'll eventually get the hang of everything though, and when you do, you'll see why this is one of the immersive sims. You'll start noticing things that you've seen in so many other games, and you'll realize, oh, this is where they got them from. You'll start getting it, and before you're even done with your first playthrough, you'll have ideas for your build in the next playthrough. You'll know how each enemy moves and how to take advantage of their shape and their model so that you can like attack them and take them down faster. You might even figure out how to play basketball. There's one last thing to go over for the remaster, and that's how the multiplayer has been restored. Yes, restored. System Shock 2 did indeed have multiplayer in its original iteration. Heck, I had to go and double check that myself by looking at my old footage, and yup, the multiplayer tab is right there at the start menu. I guess I and who knows how many other people over the years just glossed right over it, as System Shock 2 isn't really a game that you think of when you're thinking of multiplayer experiences. According to this blog post on the matter, which damn, they did this without a complete source code, there was a lot of hours sunk into getting this multiplayer working for the current age of gaming, since according to the same article, this was the kind of multiplayer where you gotta share IP addresses and have individually synced save files. So I gave the multiplayer a try with fellow box stacker Church of Poe over on the Purple Place, and it changes the game a lot, in a good way. A lot of builds are made more accessible because while you don't get to share items like ammunition and weapons, you do share research and cyber modules. This means that it works out great, as when there's more than one person, you don't have to dump points into coverage abilities and skills, and you can specialize a little more. We actually ended up having a great run where I mained hacking and cybernetic affinity to make security a non-issue for our entire run, while Poe went into psionics from the early game, which isn't so bad when there's someone else with a gun while you're still speccing into your bread and butter abilities. We were doing really well too. We managed to progress in about 2 hours and change, about as much as I was able to get done in 5 solo, because with 2 sets of hands, a lot more work can get done. And I mentioned that time frame because unfortunately, that's all we were able to get out of the multiplayer. It took a solid 15 minutes to get the game going, where based on chat logs, I had to set up the lobby no less than 5 times in order to get the game going, which in no way was helped by the fact that for some reason, if both of you try to watch the opening cutscene, the guest player gets kicked out of the game and you gotta set it up all over again. I understand though that this might be a leftover bug from the original game. Then we found another bug the hard way. So once we hit about a third of the way through hydroponics, Poe's game client attempted to divide by 0 and crashed, which I understand to be a common thing in multiplayer. Whereas in my entire solo run, my client worked like a champ. It didn't flinch at anything. And then, when she tried to rejoin, it just wasn't letting her in. So I tried to restart the session. Then I made the mistake of saving before quitting out and trying to load the host game, and it was a no-go. Turns out there is also a bug where if someone crashes and you save before they can get back in, that save file is borked for any further multiplayer. I think this might have also been a remnant of an old bug going back to that synced save file thing back in the day. In the few days since the remaster had been out, there had already been a few posts on the Steam discussion forums about having this same problem, and it's quite unfortunate, and I hope Night Dive figures something out because later in the day, they did their own multiplayer stream, and even they weren't immune to people disconnecting from games because their game crashed in multiplayer. For now though, it sucks, but admittedly I'm not too sad about it because I don't really think of multiplayer when I think of System Shock 2, so that's just a wash. In conclusion, System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster is one thing above all else. A classic made accessible. It's right on Steam to download and play without any mods or fuss. And speaking of mods, there's a whole mods tab. Who knows, maybe we'll get Workshop, but I don't want to put words in Night Dive's mouth. It also should be on PSN and Xbox in a couple weeks. Scratch that. As I was proofreading this script, the news came out that it will be available on console on July the 10th, so 5 days from now. Apparently there was some sort of issue with certification on a game that's 25 years old, so alrighty then. What matters is that now you don't need to worry about anything other than buying and downloading the game. And it's a great game. It's one of the most influential games in the 25 years it has been around. So go for it. Before we go though, don't forget to do all the algorithm things such as liking the video and subscribing so you can get the next video as soon as it's out. And maybe leave a comment to help others find this in the algorithm. And now it is also Halloween in July, which means yearly rates on patreon.com/charlatanwonder are slashed as low as they'll go, and that anyone who pledges at the annual rate gets the patron patch as a free thank you gift. And everyone who pledges yearly at the $5 recipe tier or higher gets not just the patron patch and the patron apron, but also the special surprise gift. Now let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it drawing, painting, or experimenting with biological matter to create a hive mind species, and then having second thoughts about the whole experiment, what you do is not content. It is art. Content is a word that in recent years has been twisted into meaning a means to reduce all your skills, passions, and aspirations into a gray sludge meant for nothing more than to make a line go up for someone else's benefit. Your art in no way deserves that. Art is sacred. Art is inalienably a reflection of its creator by the very act of its creation, and in no way do you deserve to be reduced to content. So get out there and fight for your art by fighting against the contentification of everything. And stay saucy.
Chocolate's activity update. He just likes to sit in the middle of the office now, by the door, to the closet, where I keep all the junk. Why here? Why not your scratchy post? Why anything? Tell me, Chonkalis, what saucy thoughts are in your saucy head? Are you just trying to bask in the sun? That's probably it. A loaf in the morning sun. You a silly loaf? Ooh, I got a pet. I got to pet you. Can I get a scratch? I think he's just very pleased that he's in the sunlight. So he's a little more tolerant of my shenanigans.